My name is LeRoy Larry and welcome. Natural physics will explain in down-to-earth scenarios how the principles of physics could have come about from observing nature. Each episode begins with a scenario followed by an example to illustrate the application of these principles in futuristic research at the frontiers of science, such as my astrophysics research, and then concludes with an exploration of how these same principles could have very well been used by ancient cultures and civilizations. Mathematics is naturally encountered and incorporated as the exciting and fun tool of science that it is. Science is the window into our amazing world of nature, and mathematics is the tool to open that window. Natural physics encompasses current, futuristic, and ancient physics, and ties them together by the principles of physics that are common threads running throughout each. Greetings. I'm LeRoy Larry and welcome to Natural Physics, live from Costa Rica. My guest today is Mariela Bonilla. Hello, Mariela.
Greetings. Hello, LeRoy. How are you?
How are you? I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm great too. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Mariela, your question last week, it haunted me about what did the slaves do after they were freed. It's a very personal question. You have the history books and what's the word? His story, right? History, his story, the history of the culture that has conquered or what have you. That's who writes the history books. And your question just said, from a very personal level, it posed the question, as a human being, where you've been programmed to act in a certain way, and all of a sudden that's gone, and what do you do? And what I wanted to do was I wanted to take a little time to expound upon that in view of, July 4th coming up is Independence Day in the United States.
Excuse me.
And
July
yes.
4th is also my birthday.
Oh! Well, then we need to introduce you to Tom Cruise in, that movie Born on the 4th of July, or
course,
was that
Bruce?
Bruce Springsteen's song, right? Born on the 4th of July, and there was a
Right.
movie, right? Okay, then. Right on, Mariela. Wow. Oh, well, happy early birthday.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I know in the United States they celebrate my birthday as big as they can. I know. Every year.
Okay, let me try my Spanish. Okay. Feliz Proxima Cumpleaños para...
Excelente.
Okay, gracias, Mary. I know you let me off the hook, but thank you.
Great.
All right. Well, okay. So with the 4th of July coming up, Independence Day in the United States, okay, let's look with respect to our previous episode. Okay. So now I have a magazine here. I'm going to put it to the camera and I'm going to read the title. It's a National Geographic magazine dated February 2020. And it's the cover title is Last Journey into Slavery. And it's about the very last slave ship that, came to the United States, okay, in 1860. Okay, so now let's do a little timeline here with respect to the previous episode. All right, 1619, the very first slave ship arrived from Africa carrying slaves on the coast of the United States in the state of Virginia. 1619, which is 11 years after the first colony, Jamestown, right? New England. Okay, so Only 11 years after the first colony was founded in the New World, we have slaves uh, being brought to the United States. 11 years, 1619. Okay, so now let's go forward to 1861. Oh no, let's go forward to 1776. So 1619, first slaves were brought to the United States. I will, if you know, I'm gonna slap myself if I keep making that mistake. I'm in Costa Rica. I am not in the United States, and I'm very happy as such. Okay, so all right, all right. So 1619, first slaves are brought to the United States. 1776, the United States proclaims its independence as a sovereign country. Okay.
7 years
1861.
later.
I'm sorry, Mariela. What?
Almost 80 years later.
Yes, yes. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now I'm gonna go back and start because I left something out on the timeline. Okay. So 1608, first colony founded in the New World by Europeans. Jamestown, 1608. 11 years later, the first ship arrives carrying slaves from Africa on the coastline of Virginia in New England. Okay. 1776, and as Mariela pointed out, 80 years so or later, the United States announces its independence as a sovereign country. Okay. 1861, the Civil War starts because the United States is divided on the issue of slavery, the issue of stealing a person's identity and forcing them to live a life that was not of their making, taking away their
Right.
freedom. So that's what the Civil War is about, pure and simple. And
Mhm.
just a little side note, isn't it interesting that right now in the United States, 2021, the activities that are going on would reflect that same division over racial issues? That's what's going on. Okay, so back to the Civil War in 1861. Okay, the following year, 1862, the Proclamation of Emancipation is stated, freeing the slaves. They are free. September 22nd, 1862. Okay, now let's go to 1865, the end of the Civil War, 3 years later. And in June 19th of 1865, the slaves in Texas get the word that they are free 3 years after the fact. All right.
Right.
So,
Mhm.
again, in the previous episode, I made the off the cuff statement that it took a while and I thought it might have been 2 years. I wanted to quantify my statement. And so we see that, when you think about it, it almost took 4 years because the Emancipation Proclamation was given in September of 1862, and the slaves in Texas received the information in June of 1865, which is what, only 3 months. You have June, July, August, September. That's only 3 months shy of being what, 4 years. So imagine slaving in the fields day in and day out, no life. I mean, you have a life, you make the best of your life, and then you find out word that you've actually been free for about 3 years.
Right.
Okay, I
Yeah.
actually bumped my
It's
yeah.
it's really it's of course it's really hard to know personally what they did, but what I wanted to focus on was in general. In general, people get used to what they live. if they were slaves, they continue in slavery no matter if they were already freed.
You got that right, Mariela. And you know what? Okay, this magazine that I showed earlier. Okay,
Right.
now
Hmm.
it talks about the last slave ship to reach the shores of the United States, which is in 1860. So putting that back into our timeline, right? You have
Hmm.
um, the first slave ship arrived in 1619,
Hmm. Right.
and then you have uh, the last slave ship arrived in 1860, right? 1 year before the start of the Civil War.
Hmm.
Okay. And what's so cool about this article is you asked the question of what
Hmm.
did they do? This
Hmm.
article talks about the generations that are descendant from those
Hmm.
slaves that were on that last ship that arrived on the shores of 1860. And I'm going to show some pictures because basically what this article does, Mariella, in answering
Uh-huh.
your question, is it takes that last slave ship, that last slave ship in 1860, and shows what they're doing now. And you find out that a lot of the newly freed slaves, they founded their own communities uh, with what they had, doing the best they could, and they flourished. They founded their own communities in an alien world. I mean, with my way I think, it would be like being on Mars
Hmm.
and being able to found your own community because everything else around you is alien. And you know what? If you read this article, and I'm going to show some pictures from it, you'll find out that they actually, in some of these communities, they oriented their houses to point towards Africa because, I mean, it's the best they could do. They had been stolen, snatched up from their lives, and brought to an alien world, basically. That's what I view it as, an alien world. And what did they do? They tried to keep some kind of remote connection to their homeland. Their cult. Like you talk about the Baruka had the dance with
Hmm.
the devils beating up
Hmm.
on the bull that represented Spain. That's what they were
Uh-huh.
doing. They pointed
Right.
their houses towards Africa as to say, hey, we may be in some alien world. We don't know where
Right.
we are, but we remember our homeland, we remember our culture, and we're not going to turn loose of it. So just real quickly, let me show you these pages, and then we'll get
Uh-huh.
on with the. So here you have. Uh, these are some of the descendants of those slaves that were
Hmm.
on
Right.
that last ship from Africa in 1860. Okay,
Hmm.
these are their real life ancestors,
Uh-huh.
and they tell how they hear the stories that were handed down word of mouth from their descendants. Okay?
Uh-huh.
And just like when I was talking about how I used to hear references to Timbuktu when I was growing
Hmm.
up. So, again, this is a National Geographic special edition, and it's about that last slavery ship that arrived
February
on the shores.
2020, right?
I'm sorry, Muriel, what'd you say?
The magazine was in February 2020.
That's correct. That's correct.
Right. It was
Yes.
published.
And it's one of those special editions that
Uh-huh.
National Geographic does, and it's a great article. I mean, the fact that they were able to go back and talk to the descendants of the last group of slaves that were
Uh-huh.
brought from Africa to the United States,
Hmm.
and I mean, is it talk about word of mouth, right?
Right.
And so again, your question was so profound about what did they do,
Hmm.
and I wasn't satisfied with my answer to you
Yes,
in the
I am.
previous episode. So again, there you have it. Where, as you said, Mariela, people do the best with what they have, and what is uh, Spock say in Star Trek too? Something about living creatures.
Hmm.
They do the best with what they got, and that's what it
Right.
is. That's what nature is.
Right. Right. Totally.
uh, okay, so now I wanted to do that, and so now what I would like to do is, Mariella, there's some things that you said that have totally intrigued me that I want to go back and revisit because, okay, uh,
But Leroy, I would
remember,
like to ask you something.
okay,
Like 2 or 3 weeks ago, you showed us a book that you studied, I think, when you were in high school, if I'm not
that's
misunderstood.
correct. Yes,
Yeah, it mentioned, and it has a picture of one of the spheres.
right.
Did you check, or do you remember what it says about the spheres?
Okay, this book, it was it was by this author named Eric von Daniken, who he
Uh-huh.
had a previous book that was a sensation. It was called Chariots of the Gods, and what it was about, it was he looked at all the different archaeological sites around the world and connected them to the possibility that the human race had been contacted by aliens in the distant past. And a lot of
Mhm.
his arguments are not to be discounted. Some of them are kind of out there, but I mean, just to ask that question is pretty cool. And so, this book, I think I was probably a sophomore in high school, and I came upon it in a bookstore. I didn't know anything about the previous book, Chariots of the Gods, but the title was Gods from Outer Space. And sophomore in high school, I'm all the way comic books, Marvel, DC, oh, the whole deal. So it caught my attention and I got it. And the interesting thing about it, Mariella, is I was a sophomore in high school, so I hadn't as yet taken physics. I didn't take
Mhm.
physics until I was a senior in high school. My high school in Omaha, Nebraska for the offered physics for the first time my senior year. And so when I read this book, I didn't know anything about physics. I hadn't heard about physics, but the material in the book really caught my interest. And yes, there's a page that shows a picture of a sphere, one of the spheres in Costa Rica. It's not, quote, my unquote sphere that's on the campus of the University of Costa Rica that I'm standing next to, but
Mhm.
I think it's probably a sphere in front of the maybe the embassy or something, but it's a sphere of Costa Rica. So evidently, when I was 15 years old, I actually read about the spheres of Costa Rica, but I didn't remember that until I dug the book out and came upon the picture. And so here it is, 15. Wow, that's 50 years ago, right? 15 years old, 65 years old. 50 years ago, I wind up coming upon something that grabbed my interest before I became interested in physics. I mean, I knew I wanted to be a scientist, but it wasn't until I took physics that had astronomy in it that I learned what kind of scientist I wanted to be. And
Mhm.
so, back to what you said, yeah, I mean, I think it's my term again about a cool creepy is the fact that I had actually had, if you want to say it, a contact with the spheres of Costa Rica when I was 15 years old. So, Mariella, what I wanted to ask you, I wanted to go back to what you said about
Mhm.
how in the community, individual families constructed the spheres. Is that what you said?
Well, I read in the investigation that they gather in groups, not exactly in families, but the spheres were located in some houses. That's why I concluded that it could be families. So I'm not sure,
So,
but I concluded it.
okay, so you're thinking that each
Hmm.
family within the Baduka village or a
Hmm.
particular village had the responsibility, the happy responsibility of constructing a sphere.
Right,
The
right.
whole sorry, the whole family.
Probably. And
Okay.
I would say that that's why they are in different sizes, probably. Because some of the spheres were found in front of houses. So could be a family journey to create the sphere to place them, I don't know, as an ornament or to worship their gods, right?
Right. I have a cool picture to show that actually shows it's going to show two spheres that are still embedded in the ground and they're lined up with the sunrise, which
Hmm.
goes. Remember when I was talking about how the other ancient civilizations of the time, such as Egypt and Samaria or Babylon, Assyria, Peru, how they all seem to have cued off of the moon in their
Hmm.
initial astronomical observations. And they got very adept at keeping track of the motion of the moon. So with the Baruka, just naturally, I thought maybe they did the same thing. I don't know, but maybe they had their own deal. And when you talk about how the individual families all participated in the construction of the spheres, and back to your pictures of the beautiful creations, the artwork that they did, and if I remember correctly, you said that one individual was responsible for each of those creations. Is that correct?
Right, right. That's correct.
And you also said that the Badukas, they had their own way of governing themselves, correct?
Hmm. Hmm.
Which which
Right.
was, could you just, I know I'm going off on a little tangent here because see, that's what happens. I think of things and I talk about them, like for example with Juneteenth. I thought about how long it took for the word to get from Washington D.C. to Texas, and
Hmm.
I threw out some dates that I thought were correct, but to be a scientist, I wanted to quantify that and go back and and find out the dates. So when I go off on a tangent a little bit and I say something that I think, if I'm not satisfied, I will go back and quantify that. But you had said, when you had said that the Baduka, they govern themselves. Now, do you think that this system of governing was at all connected to the spheres, to the alignment? Because I know the spheres were at the root of their culture. I mean, it was part of their identity, and I'm just
Right.
wondering if it was tied, their way of governing was tied at all into the spheres. I mean,
Hmm.
it might
Right.
sound outlandish, and you know I wanted to use that word, but it
Right.
might sound outlandish. But I'm wondering, what do you think?
Probably yes, because they wanted to continue with the traditions, and part of their traditions are their gods, to worship their gods, and to that's their religion. It's not the same that we follow. So probably they
Okay.
continue with the same customs.
And it keeps striking me how you said that when technology started coming into the picture, the younger
Mhm,
generations, they weren't so into the ancient knowledge of how to use
mhm,
the spheres
mhm.
as a lunar calendar, as a way to
Right.
predict lunar eclipses, and they lost interest. The elders weren't able to communicate with the younger generation, and
Mhm.
the encroachment of technology actually led to them forgetting how the
Mhm.
spheres were used as a lunar calendar. Is that correct?
Right, correct. But also because some of the spheres were removed. So
Right,
even if they know how to use them, they can't.
right. Okay. And I know I'm repeating myself, everybody. I just, one part is to keep myself in check, that I'm remembering all the facts correctly, and also new listeners and viewers to help bring you up to date. So, okay, then I have some documents to show that some of y'all out there may be thinking, oh, they're just talking. Oh, yeah, it might be this, it might be that. Whoop, da da da. But there are serious research papers that are devoted to what we're talking about.
Right.
Mariela is scheduled to speak with the head archaeologist
Mhm.
of the Museum of the National Museum here in Costa Rica, which has been the home of the spheres and the investigation from day one since they were first discovered. And she
Right.
has an audience. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mariela. You have an audience
Mhm.
to speak with the head archaeologist about the investigation that's going on.
Right. He has been very busy, so we haven't talked
Uh,
yet, but
oh
we
no,
will someday.
yeah, no, understandably. In fact,
Mhm.
I'm sure. My understanding is that he was instrumental in getting the area of the spheres as a UNESCO heritage site.
Right.
Correct? I'm
Mhm.
sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Since
Protect.
2014.
Yes. Okay. Protected. So, remember, everybody, I said that you can find almost anything on the internet, world's largest library at your fingertips, except for those. Now, here comes another one of my dreams, and it probably comes from the movies, but you know, these old time ancient books that are found buried in some obscure library from the medieval times or something,
Mhm. Mhm.
and they're the ones that have the lock on it, right? Where you have to have a key to unlock them, right? And you open them up, and you know there's all this ancient knowledge, right? So, except for that, there's so much that you can find on the internet, and
Right.
I was able to find one of the original research papers that were written by the head archaeologist at the National Museum here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly scroll through it so you can see the effort
Mhm.
that goes into these scientific, excuse me, investigations. And there's not a lot of investigations on the spheres. I mean, because they're so unique, I would think there would be more, but hey, that, oops, I hit the microphone. That leaves just more for us. So, but I would say this document is probably the authority on the spheres. It was done by the archaeologist right here in Costa Rica. He's from Costa Rica. Mariela is
Mhm.
going to speak with him, and my goal is just to scroll down to page 17, which is going to show the latitude and the longitudes of the site where these spheres are located in Costa Rica. Because if you remember, with respect to the lunar nodes that I talked about that other civilizations used to predict solar and lunar eclipses, I thought perhaps one place to start would be to see if the location, the geographical location of these spheres had any kind of connection with the lunar nodes with respect to Costa Rica. So I want to show that. And then another document I want to show, and I'll scroll down to page 34, I think it is there's a beautiful picture that shows two spheres that are still embedded in the ground, and they're perfectly lined up with the sunrise. Uh, I think the solar solstice or one of the phenomena of nature, winter, summer solstice, or one of the equinoxes, spring or vernal. But point is, this photograph, this photograph shows evidence that there is the possibility that the spheres were aligned with events that occurred on the horizon, whether it was the rising or the setting of the sun or the rising or the setting of the moon. And as I
Mhm.
talked about in the last episode, all the ancient cultures around the world, whether independently or together, they all teed off the moon in terms of their first astronomical object of study. They studied it in detail, became expert at it, were able to predict astronomical phenomena. And mind you, it took millennia of years to accumulate such databases where you could actually put together a calendar that worked. So here you had the
Mhm.
ingenuity of the human race over thousands of years being able to obtain a database where they could establish a calendar that would predict lunar and solar events, whether Egyptian, Barucan, Incan, Mayan, uh, Chinese. I'm sorry, were you going to say something,
Right.
Mariela? Okay,
Right. Right. The also the pyramids, the Egyptian, the Italian and Mexican, they were also created to be for the ancient civilizations to be close to their gods, to have contact with their gods. So we're
that's
not
right.
talking about religion, but we're talking about spirituality. And definitely the spheres and the ancient civilizations were trying to be, were built to be close to their gods, to worship their gods.
Yes, and when you think about the fact that,
Probably
I'm
to
sorry.
get some information or I don't know. Sorry.
No, no. Well, when you think about how the motion of the moon was
Mhm.
definitely a survival mode where it told the peoples around the world when to plant your crops and when to harvest them. I mean, the motion of the moon, right? Survival. And then it developed into astronomy. And oh, wow, I noticed that there was a lunar eclipse 10 years ago, and now there's another one. Maybe there's a pattern. Remember, I talked about patterns, right? You look through your data to find patterns that you can match
Mhm.
to mathematical equations, and that's our window into our amazing world of nature, the mathematical equations. But it comes from the science, right? It comes from experiments or observations of nature, as the ancient peoples did. So what I want to do is I want to go to uh, oh, so the first two PDFs are about the spheres. The third PDF, everybody, and I'm just going to put it up for a minute because you can find it on the internet. Remember, I talked about the expedition into the Amazon rainforest and the birds and how they had this reddish brown plant that they used to soften the stone to build their nests in this sheer cliff. Okay, now, I still can't locate where I came across that obscure article that was taken from the log of an expedition at the turn of the century. But I found an article a full on research article where a scientific group looked upon the possibility of using plant substance to make a cement that softens stone. Full on scientific research paper published. I think it's in the 1980s. We'll see when I pull it up. But there you go. Full on research paper. So, okay, here's the first. Um, here's the first article. So, what I want to do is I want to go to page. Let's try page 17 first, if you could, uh, keeper of the document. Oh, okay. Never mind. Let's stay here. This is the article I was talking about where somebody has done a research, uh, Brookhaven, New York, on using plant extracts to soften stone. And you'll see the date is 1997. I don't know. Can we get, is it possible to bring up the whole document and then just scroll down through it? Is that possible? I mean, I guess maybe not, huh?
No,
This docket is about 7 pages. So when you say the whole document, which part of it?
Uh-huh. Everybody, this is Ray. Hey, he's the keeper of everything. I mean, oh, wow, we couldn't do this without Ray. Member of the Fat Pack. Oh, definitely, right on. Okay, all right, no worries. So anybody, if you go on the internet and you type in making cements with plant extracts, this full-on research paper will come up where this group, I think they're at the University of Kansas, I'm not sure, but they actually did research. Oh yeah, no, it says University of Bradford, United
Bradford.
Kingdom, but yeah, but I think they were affiliated with the University of Kansas. Anyway, they actually did experiments where they found that there's plant extracts that are actually effective in softening the surface of stone. So here you have an article, 1997, that is talking about knowledge that quite possibly, oh, see, there we go. Okay, see, there's a page from it. Full on research article, right? But again, the possibility that the indigenous tribes of the Amazon jungle knew all of this information millennia ago, right? There's your references. Okay, so now what I would like to do, I would like to go to either one of those other PDFs, if possible.
but
And I know
this
these,
one is very interesting because it says it was, well, it reprinted information from 1981 and 1982.
right? Yes, yes. And the 1997, I don't know if that was when it got entered on the internet, but yeah, I remember seeing that, Mariela, early
Right.
80s, right? And this
Mm-hmm.
obscure article I came upon that I haven't been able to locate was from a
Right.
log entered in the late 1800s or the early 1900s, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Interesting,
Right.
huh?
Interesting. Very interesting.
Very interesting. Okay, so
Actually,
keep.
in 1981 is the year when I was born. We're talking about 40 years
Whoa.
ago.
Oh
Right.
wow. Gee,
And
thanks,
and
Mariella.
recalling
I already
recalling
know I already know I'm an old dude, and you just reinforced that one. Okay. All right.
right.
Okay.
Recalling the question that I asked you about the book related to the sphere, I
Yes.
asked you because we, well, here in Costa Rica, we're not informed or taught that deeply about the spheres. I mean, we learn. I mean, when I was in high school, I reminded I studied about the indigenous cultures, but not that deeply. We didn't even know about the spheres, or I don't remember. And I don't remember have seen them in any book.
Wow. And
Yes.
that goes right with you telling me that uh the Baduka would like to recapture the knowledge that they
Mhm.
once had about
Mhm.
the spheres that were lost due to technology. So again, our show has turned into an endeavor to try to somehow reconstruct this ancient knowledge. I mean, as you said, this is a one of a kind, nowhere else to be found in the world, bona fide ancient enigma. And you remember I talked about how the archaeological area is 10 hectares, which, excuse me, and a hectare is, or here I go with my numbers, but I think, uh, well, I know Costa Rica was 51,100 square kilometers,
Right.
and 10 hectares, I think, came out to be a tenth of a square kilometer. So when you think of the percentage that a tenth of a square kilometer is to 51,100 square kilometers, and then you think about the percentage that Costa Rica, 51,100 square kilometers, is with respect to the landmass of the globe, that really says what a minuscule, minute portion of the globe was chosen to do these spheres. And when you said that peoples from far away as Peru came to the land
Mhm.
of the balls to
Mhm.
gather with the other indigenous peoples, we have something here. And I want to get to these two other PDFs because just like the one I just showed, if we can page through both, there's a lot of scientific information here, a lot of archaeological information, but nowhere is it stated remotely, hypothetically, theoretically, that the spheres have a connection to being an astronomical instrument that was used by the Baduka or some other peoples to predict lunar eclipses. Nowhere in the literature. So everybody,
Interesting.
what we have here, and with Mariela talking about how the culture of the people is tied into nature and how they govern themselves and how they were unconquered by the Spanish, we have something
Right.
that is nowhere else in the world. And Mariela, you saying that maybe they don't, maybe the Baruca don't, Costa Ricans in general, and Baduka specifically, don't appreciate the enormously unique phenomena they have that's
Right.
nowhere else in the
Totally.
world. Totally,
Totally.
totally.
Mhm.
Egyptians didn't have spheres. The Mayans didn't have spheres. The
Mhm.
Incas didn't have spheres, right?
Mhm.
The
Right.
Druids, Stonehenge. I can go on and on. The Dogon of West Africa. Nobody else in the world had spheres. I mean, come
Mhm.
on. This
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
this is unique. And here you have a culture that wants to remember what those spheres were about. This is made to order for us. So, everybody, I want to go to these PDFs. I want to give you a sample of the research that has been done and the fact that we have a serious unknown here that is not documented in the literature. So, okay. Um, is
I
it
think I
possible?
mentioned I mentioned that some spheres were colored.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like the
Or,
pink one that you were.
right. Right.
Yeah. And they were
Right.
naturally colored, right? I mean, that wasn't everybody. I got to tell you, Mariella showed me this picture of a
Yes.
sphere in a neighborhood that was painted by the people in the neighborhood with
Yes. It was in Punta
flowers
Arenas.
and oh,
And
that's just awful. I mean, they didn't drill
it is.
into it or anything, but oh, that
It
was
is awful.
awful.
But
Oh,
you know what?
yeah.
I mean, for me, that's awful. But I don't blame them. As I said, we don't get that information at school. Probably they just found some rocks, some stones out of their houses, and they said, "Okay, let's color this and let's try to decorate."
What an
They don't.
excellent what an excellent point, Mariella. You're right. Let me check
Right.
myself. Yeah, they didn't know. I mean, it's very possible. I mean, it's like the farmer that had the piece of rock in his yard that told the archaeologists that there's a whole bunch of them up the hill, and we go up and get them and use them to build our houses, and they wind up
Right.
discovering Machu Picchu. So I hear you.
Mhm.
Right on.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So let's get to these PDFs. I want to get to the on one of them. I want to get and everybody, you can go and look up. You can look up this document on the internet and go through it. But I want to go to the page that shows the latitude and longitudes of the archaeological sites. So we have a point to start from. Remember, I was saying that the first place to start would try to find out where the geographical location of the spheres are, the ones that are still in their original locations. So uh, this PDF, one of them has that page, and the other one has the beautiful picture of the two spheres lined up with the sunrise. So one PDF, I want to go to page 17. The other PDF, I want to go to page 34. So let's see if we can do that. Okay,
Mhm.
let's go to 17 first. Okay, so this one is 34. Please go to 34. Thank you so much, Ray. Everybody, y'all got to meet Ray. Okay, there we go. Go back, Ray. One more back. There's a beautiful picture of two spheres
Mhm.
that are still in their original locations. They haven't been removed, and they are totally lined up with the sunrise. The caption down there, um, I'm not sure if it says a particular like a solstice. Oh, thank you, Ray. Sunrise.
Sunrise.
Okay, so it's a sunrise. But thank you, Ray. If you can, so point is that here is evidence that these spheres could definitely have been connected with observations of the rise and the sunset of the sun and the moon. Okay, there we go.
Mhm.
All right,
Mhm.
now, Ray, if you would, please go to the second PDF and let's go to page 17.
As well as the pyramids. The pyramids are
That's
oriented
right.
to the sun.
That's right. The Great Pyramid
Mhm.
is oriented, the corners of the Great Pyramid in Egypt are oriented to the north, south, east, and west, the
Uh-huh.
cardinal
The
points of the,
cardinal. Uh-huh.
yeah. And like you said, on certain celestial events, it's like
Mhm.
here I go back to Raiders of the Lost Ark. Remember the scene where he's down in the pyramid, and there's the map of the city of the dead, and he's trying to find the location of the
Mhm.
Lost Ark, and he has to put the
Mhm.
rod in that certain hole, and as the sun comes up on that notch in the pyramid and it shines
Mhm.
down, a ray
Mhm.
shines on the location. Excuse the pun, Ray. Hey, Ray,
Right.
let's get that other PDF up. But a ray shines down and shows him the location of the Lost Ark. So, Ray, if you please, let's bring up that second PDF. Mariela, if you would read that second paragraph up from the bottom that talks
Mhm.
about latitude and longitude, if you
Mhm.
would translate that, please.
Okay. Mhm.
Okay, right there. Yeah.
Okay. It says that it is located at the at the hill, up the hill in an indigenous settlement where indigenous live. Let me see. Okay, 150. 150 latitude, 324,600 south north.
Okay.
Longitude 520, 950 west east.
Okay. Thank you, Mariela. Thank you.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Ray. Okay, everybody. So you see, we're working with real scientific information here that has not made a tie-in to our little bit of verbal information from Mariela's friend about the lunar calendar eclipse. So I know I can't keep saying it enough, but I feel like we have something undiscovered, unknown. I mean, if it's reclaiming ancient knowledge from the past, from the Badukas' ancient knowledge, then so be it. How awesome, right? So this is what we're going to continue on, and I know we're pushing on 2 hours. Um, Ray, would you flash the natural physics website up to everybody that you were so nice to do at the end of the last episode, so that people start asking us questions? Go to this website. You can address it to me, Mariela, whoever you want. Go to the contact page, ask your question. We're going to figure out how to do it where you can do it live. Because I know people on Facebook, you can type in a question right during our live stream, but we'll get it figured out how you can just pipe in a question, a comment, anything. LeRoy, you don't know what you're talking about, dude. You know, anything, right? So, okay. Mariela, in closing, do you have anything in closing?
Let's tune next week, please.
Okay, and everybody, you see the road we're continuing down. We have a true adventure of discovery, a true adventure of exploration and discovery on our hands. And it involves helping indigenous peoples reclaim their knowledge, right? I mean, how cool is that? And as Mariela said, they may not even realize what a unique part of their culture that they have, not only scientifically, but culturally. So you have this little bitty 10 hectare of land that testifies that for some reason, Costa Rica is special in all the world. Okay, so everybody, Mariela, thank you so much. Anything
Thank
else
you,
in
Larry.
closing? You're welcome, Mary. Thank you. Anything Otra vez, anything in closing, Mariela?
Thank you, everyone.
All right, everybody. Tune in next week as we continue our adventure of exploration and discovery. Same fat time, same fat channel.